Yeah, a lot of from people work in my company as well.
Mm-hmm.
They're between 35 to 65 an hour. Yeah.
Awesome.
Sometimes more if it's on a Friday. Cash jobs, credit jobs.
Sure.
Very chill work.
Okay, we are on. So, as Hashem is Baruch, we're back on Heilig Maharal, Tiferet Yisrael. Dive in chapter Chaf Aleph. Yeah, Chaim.
Cold water.
Now I got my teeth. Thank you.
Right.
His brother, he wrote, he knows that Torah de Echad Shemiyuchad v'nifta v'nafal. Remember last time, it's been many moons, when about Avraham Avinu started off the existence of Torah in the world. And he represented the white fire of Torah, the great love of Torah. Torah's chesed. And then there's the other name for Torah, which he brought in the 20th chapter, Torah's emes, or of truth, and that's the white fire. It's the fire of love, and the black fire, the letters, that's the fire of truth. And that ultimately the white fire is the foundation of the whole thing. That's why of all of the Avos, Avraham is the one who was most clearly singled out in the Chumash as keeping all of the Torah, keeping every aspect of the Torah. Yaakov Avinu, there's a hint in Lavan Garti. I kept Taryag Mitzvah Shamarti. Garti is the letters Taf Reishu Gimel 613. But Avraham Avinu is the only one who has a whole pasuk. Eikev Asher Shama Avraham Bakoli Vaishmor Mishmarti Chukosai V'Torosai. Bereshit chapter 26. That he listened to my voice and keeps all of my safeguards, my statutes, and my teachings. Only Avraham has that kind of open verse that like he kept the whole Torah. The Talmud tells us that he kept the whole Torah. It means on a spiritual level he was not yet commanded. He's singled out because he's the Isha Chesed, like we learned in depth a few weeks ago. Now picking up to learn about Moshe Rabbeinu, the one who gives the Torah. That's what Rabbeinu will learn about him today and next week. Mitzvah. But it is proper that the person who gives the Torah will be somebody who is very special and separated out from everyone else. Moshe Rabbeinu really of anyone in Yiddishkeit, he's still not seen as being perfect, right? He doesn't get to enter Eretz Yisrael because he's seen as having made a mistake, hitting the rock. What exactly is that mistake is a very deep learning in and of itself. He's still not painted as perfect, still a human being, but compared to everyone else, he's like head and shoulders above everybody. We can learn about this. This is because of the Torah's great station, the Torah's great status. Torah itself is something that is above, something that is incomparable to anything else within creation. It's that light of Hashem's vision coming into creation, as we saw. It's the light behind all of creation. It has a uniqueness to it. It's very, very important that it have that uniqueness. Miyuchedes, Madrega Eliyona, the supreme and special level, such that nothing can be compared to it. Nothing can be seen as like on par with Torah. Therefore, it makes sense that the person who gives it to her also is someone who's like peerless, like Moshe Rabbeinu. Who is clearly special and separated in his level, all other people who come to the world. Moshe. Even though the Torah is not just for him, Torah is for everybody, but it's given through one person. Just as it is within the soul of a person, in the human body, the heart is different from everything else. It's central. It sends the life energy to everything else. Right? It's apart. It stands apart from everything else in the body. It sends out the life energy to every other limb of the body. Nothing else in the body contains the life energy of the body in a kind of a total way, in a central way, like the heart does. And now he starts to analyze very important Gemara, page 23b of Makos, Masechet Makos. 613 mitzvahs were told to Moshe at Har Sinai. Shneimar Torah tziva lanu Moshe. Torah is gematria 611. If the Taf and the Resh, then you have a Vav and Hey, 6 and 5, it's 11. Taf is 400, Resh is 200, 600, and 6 plus 5, 611. So where's the other two? Torah gematria Taf Resh Yud Aleph. Torah is gematria 611. Anochi v'lo yelecha. But the two first mitzvahs of I am the Lord your God, and you shall have no other gods before me. Shamu mipi hagvura. Am Yisrael heard directly from Hashem. And this, it's proper that it should be this way. I'll just mention, by the way, he doesn't say it here, but Rashi says that in Chumash, we did in a kind of a supernatural way hear the whole Torah also. Rashi says that Hashem said all the 10 commandments in a single moment, in like a tiny, indivisible moment where the whole thing just, like we got the whole thing. And then Rashi says, Hashem went back and said it in a kind of a sequential sound wave kind of a way. And there, we only heard the first two. And then we couldn't handle it. And Moshe said the last 8 to us. Why is it that these two first mitzvahs of I'm Lord your God who took you out from Egypt, you have no other gods before me, why were those two different from the rest of the Torah? Because the words, that commandment of Anochi, hu shekiblu Hashem yisbarach la'elokah. Those two first commandments set the stage for everything else, because they make us into subjects of the king. The second one also, it says you shall have another God, because if we would have another God also, that would ruin the whole thing. You can't have God plus anything else. And this very important moment of directly receiving upon us the Malchus of Hashem, being subjects of Hashem, being part of His kingdom. This is not a matter that is individualistic. Rak l'klal Yisrael. It's a public coronation kind of thing. It's like Rosh Hashanah sort of. It's a Hashem does does not put his name upon a single person to say, I am the God of you personally. But rather, it's a thing that is national. It's a al kol ha'uma. The idea of God being a king, only way to make a king is through a nation. I say to you personally, you're my king. It's a nice thing to say, but that's not, I don't know if it's not, whatever it is. Maybe between a chassan and a kala, they could say to each other, you're my king, you're my queen. But to set up a real coronation and to establish a relationship of a king and his people, it's just doesn't work when it's just an individual or a little group. It's a nation that makes a king its king, right? That's how it works. Ein melech below am. There's no king without a people. And therefore, Yisrael it had to be something that is all of us together. Shehem am echad, which is by way of us being one nation for Hashem. Hashem is Baruch Melech Aleim, and Hashem is our king. Bichlal zeh Moshe im Kol Yisrael, Moshe Nichlal imahem. And on this level of God being the God of all of Am Yisrael, on that level, Moshe is a subject just like everyone else. So on the level that is kind of, it's a very interesting thing. Like, there's a big argument between Maimonides and Nachmanides about whether believing in God is a mitzvah. Very, very interesting thing. The Rambam says it's a mitzvah. The Ramban, Nachmanides, is not a mitzvah because it's a prerequisite. How can you have a mitzvah to believe in God? That you need that first in order to have a mitzvah. It has to come first that there's a mitzvah, and you accept that there is a God who it makes sense for him to command you to do stuff. If you don't, you can't start with you have a mitzvah to believe in me. So
is it a mitzvah or is it not a mitzvah?
Argument. I don't know. According to the Rambam, it is. It's a very profound thing. And really, in other words, in a certain way, the kind of arguing about a dynamic that I think they both kind of agreed to, is the question of once I've accepted Hashem as being my king, in doing so, did I do a mitzvah, or is it like a pre-Torah kind of a thing? So for the Maharal over here, he's saying Torah needs to be given by somebody unique and special. But in a certain way, these first two mitzvahs, like the Gemara itself says, these first two mitzvahs, there's Torah, Tzivilanu, Moshe, but the first two are, in a certain way, they're outside of the gematria of the word Torah. It's a very, very interesting thing. There's a certain dynamic, something about those first two that are special. It's a mitzvah, technically, not a mitzvah. Okay, this argument, I don't know how to resolve it. It's a real argument. But there's a degree of this being of a kind of a different nature. Those two mitzvahs are special. This is also what we see this every day in the Shema. The Mishnah says, beginning of the second paragraph of Brachos, the first chapter of the Shema is called Kabbalas Ol Malchus Shemayim, is where we take upon ourselves that Hashem is our king. Every day and every night it's a new thing, as the world moves. And then the second chapter of V'hayam Shemoah is Kabbalas Ol Mitzvahs. So in the Shema itself, you've got this different dynamic. There's God being God, and that I'm connected and related and submit myself to God. And I hear God's oneness, and I tell all of Am Yisrael that God is one, right? And however you want to translate Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. But it comes before taking on the yoke of the mitzvahs. Similar dynamic to this whole thing. There's a relating that comes first, and then there's the mitzvahs that come out. This is also parallels the leaving of Egypt. What did the leaving of Egypt do? It established that God is our king. We now owe, so how does Hashem start the Torah? I am the Lord your God who took you out from Egypt. And therefore, it makes sense for you to serve me, because it wasn't for me, you'd still be serving Paro, right? Hashem doesn't want to just force himself on us. He wants us to have real gratitude and relate. And then once that's established, now we can say, keep Shabbos, do etc., do all the stuff, the details, the particularities of all the commandments. But there's something before Kabbalah's Ol Mitzvahs that's called Kabbalah's Ol Malchus Shammai. That parallels like these first two mitzvahs. And that's something we all hear. That's why it's a very big mitzvah to say the Shema in Shul with a minyan. And if it happens to be that you come late to Shul and they're saying Shema, if you're still in Psukei de Zimra, halacha is, wherever you are, you say Shema with them also. If you already got into the blessings of the Shema, it's a little stricter. You can't say Shema while you're still in the blessings of the Shema, but you stop and put your hand on it as if you're saying. Because there's a very big thing that the Shema in Shul parallels Har Sinai. The Shema in Shul is a public coronation. It's a public moment of, that's our king. And it's very, very important. And in a certain way, right, that's why the Chazan repeats Hashem Elokeichem Emes at the end to complete 248 words of the Shema. It's 245 words, and with those three that he adds, we have the full thing of the making God king over all of our limbs. We have 248 limbs in the body. And if you're alone, so you say El Melech Ne'eman before the Shema, in order to have the three extra words, but it's considered not the same level of really making Hashem king over all your limbs as when the Chazan, when you get those, you say the Shema together with everyone, and then he repeats those three words, then Gewalt, you really did it in a public kind of very special kind of way. So on the level of the first two commandments, Moshe is a subject like everyone else, right? And we're all just what? People, Am Yisrael, and Hashem, right? Maybe for me it's difficult. Is that the Am Yisrael and Hashem? Tonight, I just can't help but mention is Rav Kook's yard site, Rav Avim Yitzchak Cohen Cook. Tonight, this is yard site, and Chaim, and he was very, very special in his. Water? Yeah, because I got to clean my teeth off from all the sugar.
Mm-hmm. It's a real thing. It's called perpetuates.
Thank you. Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. I learned in school. It's a real disease.
Disease.
Yeah. It's a sickness.
Oh my gosh. Scary.
Yeah, it erodes your enamel, your teeth, and so like do something about it.
The Rav Kook was very sensitive to the national spirit of Am Yisrael, of awakening and coming back to Eretz Yisrael as an Am. But there was something that, we always had it, but a mass movement to back to Eretz Yisrael that every Jew in the whole world felt some pull and still feels. Hashem. Despite the BDS, maybe it turns into anger with the BDS, whatever. But there's a pull, there's an attraction, there's something very, very powerful, very, very holy. Because it's here in Eretz Yisrael that we really can make Hashem king. Hashem. Especially this year with Shemitah, by Bezat Hashem desisting.
I don't know if you guys have something to do that. Yes.
We're learning every day at 3 p.m. It's probably not the best time for you, but I can send you a link to all the YouTube shiur. I'm teaching it for an hour every day about Shemitah. Mm-hmm. To prepare. That's Hashem. I'll send you. We'll be in touch.
Sure.
But the rest of the dibros are not predicated upon us as a community, as a klal, as a group. Rest of the mitzvahs are the details of what Hashem wants, and each one of us has to do them and not do the negative mitzvahs. V'davar zeh, on the level of the mitzvahs of the Torah, Gematria 611, everything after Anochi and Lo Yiyeh. There, that's where this is true. That the Torah in its uniqueness needs to be given by a unique human being. That there was never another prophet from Israel like Moshe. And all the rest of the prophets, their job is to exhort the people to keep the Torah of Moshe, not to add or take away from it. As we said, the unique, supreme level that the Torah is on makes sense that it be given by a unique, supreme person. Now he gets into a very important question, which you might have been already wondering. What about Bilam? Right? That the Medrash says in Sifri, the end of Parshas Yosef Bracha, was no prophet like Moshe that ever arose in Israel, but in the nations of the world there was. Bilam. So now he spends the rest of the chapter distinguishing in very important ways between Moshe and Bilam. Even though Bilam did have a level of prophecy that could be compared to Moshe, still there are differences that really set Moshe Rabbeinu apart in crucial ways, as we're going to see. There are three things, first of all, the Midrash says, that Moshe had that Bilam did not have. First of all, Moshe hayam medaber imo peh el peh. Moshe spoke with Hashem mouth to mouth. It means shenemar peh el peh adaber bo. As the Torah says, I will speak to him mouth to mouth. Second thing, Moshe hayam medaber imo panim el panim, face to face. So there's some distinction between mouth to mouth and face to face. And third, Moshe medaber imo omed. When Hashem spoke to Moshe, Moshe was standing. Whereas Bilam would have to fall on the ground and did not receive his prophecy in this kind of face-to-face way.
Awesome.
It is awesome, right? What is that saying to you?
It's like the awesomeness that Moshe was receiving from God. He's like standing. It's like literally awesome. It's it's very big.
It's incredible that a person could just stand and like hear Hashem speaking to him, tell the girl, salam. לא יודע, אנחנו לומדים, לא יודע. Shlomo, it's so good to see you. It's been way too long. Yeah. I'm doing Maharal for a few more minutes. Interesting. So now he says this, the Medrash teaches us further. Yeah. What's that?
I thought you said we were starting.
No, we're in it for few. Well, no, Moshe, so he says, a very fascinating thing the Midrash says, Bilam hayodea ma kadosh baruch hu atid ledaber imo. Bilam knew what Hashem would tell him. He knew before Hashem said it what he was going to say. Very fascinating thing. Shenemar vayodea das elyon. He said about himself that he knows the consciousness of Hashem, of the Supreme. Mashal, so the Medrash says, is within that analogy for this, a metaphor to a cook of the king, the tabach shel melech, sheyodea mashmelech karev al shulchano. He knows what's going to be served today. He knows what's being set up. And then the Medrash goes on and says, and so there are three things that Bilam had that Moshe didn't have. So the first one is Bilam would know before Hashem would say it what he's going to say. Moshe didn't. It's very interesting thing. He's going to show you how these things that Bilam knew Moshe didn't know is actually to his detriment, and it shows how great Moshe was. We're going to see. Bilam knew who was talking to him. He could see a vision of Shin Dalad of Hashem. And thirdly, Bilam Daberimo Kol Sha'ah. Also, Bilam, any moment, he could hear prophecy at any moment. Whereas Moshe wasn't like that. It's only special times. He could daven. I mean, he said, like with the daughters of Tzlafchad, he said, wait, and I'll hear what Hashem says. But it wasn't in the same thing, the same kind of constancy. So Bilam has a constant state of being able to know what's going on. And he knows what's coming, what's going to be said. And he knows who's talking to him. Right? Whereas Moshe, so to speak, didn't know who was talking to him. We're going to see how that's actually the highest level. He says, this may seem strange to you that Moshe seems to have, he has three things greater than Bilam, but Bilam seems to have three things that he doesn't have. So he says, we can understand this better from another Midrash Rabbah, Vayikra Rabbah Parsha Aleph, where the Midrash there is also comparing Moshe with Bilam. It says, Hashem only reveals himself to Bilam in what's called a Chatzi Dibur, in a half speech. Because Vayikra El Moshe, with an Aleph, even though he wrote it as a small Aleph, but it's there, right? Because that's the Aleph that distinguishes him from Bilam. Whereas by Bilam, it only says Vayikar. Hashem happened upon Bilam. And this is going to be the crucial difference we're going to see. Taking the next few minutes. That the difference is basically Bilam could tune in spiritually to what's going on in spiritual worlds. He could see what's coming. He had a constant access to it. Was constantly tuned in. And he had vision of Hashem, whatever that means. Moshe was actually relating to Hashem. Bilam was tuning into God's system. And he knew what's going on in the kitchen, like what Hashem's going to be saying, because he knows what's being prepared. He knows he could see spiritually the whole system of Shemayim. And he manipulates the system to make good curses, right? But he can't make blessings, Bilam. Only Hashem could went and churned around this thing. Bilam's holding it, he's a cursor for hire, right? Why wasn't he a blesser for hire? It's not Shaykh. Rabbi Nachman explains in Likutei Moran, Torah 36, that Bilam could never make the light of Hashem come down in the form of a bracha. Because Bilam was totally tameh, he was sleeping with his donkey, he was like an unbelievably disgusting person, unbelievable. Mamash unbelievable. It's Beferish Chazal. That's what the Aton, the female donkey that he wrote, is all about. And with the great power of his will, it's like that book, The Secret. You know this book? You ever heard of it? Whatever. It's in the kind of mindfulness world that people are into today. Like, if you want something really, really strong, there's like nothing can hold you back from getting that thing. Bilam was the king of that. He really was like, that's what he thought he could go and curse. And I didn't know. There's something personal we have with Hashem. You can't, with all your system and manipulate the system, you cannot mess that up. Right? So Moshe doesn't have constant access, but that's because when you're in a real relationship with someone, it's not constant. You have special times. And then each one has their time, do their own thing. And then you see each other. And then it's not like this constant, robotic thing. I have total constant access to what's going on in your mind. This is the depth of the difference, is that, Bilam has access to everything, but Hashem doesn't have any real caring for him. Vaikar, Lashon Mikre, that, Hashem has his whole system of how he runs the world. But he's not giving to Bilam anything special, anything specific just for him. Bilam's just able, through his willpower, he was the greatest of everyone to do this, to rise up and understand what's going on in the spiritual world, and then direct it down and wipe out a whole bunch of people. That's just horrible. Turn into some great curse, Whereas Moshe Rabbeinu is mamish relating to God while standing mouth to mouth, face to face. Bilam had to fall down and it was just. And Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know who's talking to him. That's the deepest thing in the world. Of course he knew it was God, but he was beyond the level of seeing God. Lo yirani adam v'chaya, Hashem says Moshe. No one could see me and live. Because to really see what Moshe wanted, to really see, that's way beyond having a vision that Bilam had. And not knowing is the deepest thing in the world. It's like the excitement of seeing your friend. Of course you know who your friend is, but you're so excited because you don't know. You don't know. It's going to be fun. You don't know. There's something that keeps pulling you. There's some mystery of that soul. You want to hang out with them again and again and forever. Because there's an aspect of not knowing that's always there. That's how it was for Moshe Rabbeinu with Hashem. It's incredible. Much way incomparable to Bilam was the greatest of the great. Comparable to Moshe, except missing the essence of actually relating in a way of a friendship, of a covenant, of a true, conscious, deliberate way, but rather vaikar, just happenstance, working the system. He was the best at getting what he wants from heaven. And he takes money for it. And he was just like, it's nuts. That's the essence of that. When Hashem's prophecy reaches somebody like Bilam, he says, it's like somebody who throws Doma Lamisha Mashich Menu Dinar Zahav, who throws a golden coin behind his back. Eno Makpid Afim Nofala Ashbit, just like throwing a golden coin, and even if it lands in a pile of garbage, he's not paying attention to where it's going. He just wants to throw it wherever it falls. It's not a real relationship with them. It's not a real relationship with Bilam. And he says here with the nations of the world, but there are exceptions. I mean, there was Eo, for instance, who according to many opinions was not Jewish. And there was a kind of a level of prophecy that was personal to Eo also. It doesn't mean anybody, and there can be no relationship for somebody who's not Jewish with Hashem. It doesn't mean that. But with Bilam, certainly. Bilam was a totally tamei person, a real evil sorcerer dude, who just a cursor for hire. And this, the fact that he could pick up on what was going on with Hashem is not because Hashem was giving him anything in any real way. He just knew how to work the system. Hashem sends out his energies of what's going on in Shemayim that day, and he just knew better than anybody how to pick up on it, find it, focus his will, get the energy, and turn it into a good curse. When Hashem is speaking with the prophets of Am Yisrael, now the Dibur is unified with that soul. It's just for you. And this is true every time when we learn Torah. There's a special moment of you learning that piece of Torah and the way it relates to everything you've ever learned before, and the way it relates to everything you've ever davened before. It's personal like nothing else. Mamish, the Chazal say that what you say when you make a siyum on a masechet, it's some beautiful verses from Mishlei. I believe it's Kohelet or it's Mishlei. That when you go to sleep, the Torah is with you, and when you wake up, it will be on your tongue. And the Chazal said, it means when you go to sleep, it means when we go into the grave, the Torah that we learn goes there with us. After everyone leaves, after the funeral is over, and you're down there, Should be, after 120, whatever. The Gemara says we all have to die before revival of the dead, even the biggest tzaddik. So when I'm going to be all alone there, but the Torah stays with me, so the Torah is loyal. That incredibly personal thing it's a reflection of what prophecy is. It's an expression of what prophecy is. We have Torah that was given to us by Moshe, but we have it. And this is what it was for the prophets. It was personal. It was specific. It was relational. It becomes uniquely suited to that person, to each prophet. But the prophets of Am Yisrael, they can't receive their prophecy if they're tamei. That's a whole story. Remember the story with Miriam and Aaron that they heard Zipporah say, "Oi" to the 70 prophets that Moshe shared his Ruach HaKodesh with, that they're oi to their wives. Now they're not going to do their wives. And Miriam and Aaron were upset and said, "What do you mean? That Moshe is separate from you?" He said, "Yeah, because you can't have prophecy when you're tamei. Marital relations makes a person's tamei." And Miriam and Aaron said, "Well, wait a minute. We're Jewish here. We don't reject the whole idea of marital relations. But it's okay to be tamei sometimes. That you're supposed to be." And Hashem said, "But you don't understand, Moshe. He's unique." And he called out to the three of them at once. When it happened to be, Hashem chose a moment when both Miriam and Aaron were tamei at the time. And so they started screaming out, "Mayim, Mayim, we got to get to the mikvah." And he was showing them that because Moshe, Hashem needs to talk to him all the time and you never know when. Not all the time like Bilam, not a constant connection to the flow that is impersonal, but a constant possibility of a particular connection that could happen for Moshe. He's the only person who's ever on call like that. And so it was showing them, look, you're right. It's not the ideal I have for most people, but for Moshe, this is how he has to be. And don't speak badly about it, right? When a Jewish prophet is tamei, they can't receive any prophecy at all. How did Bilam? He's sleeping with his donkey. How did he get prophecy? Such tuma, because it wasn't unique prophecy. It wasn't something specific to him. It was just this overpowering of his will and big spiritual power that he had to tune into the system, to the bureaucracy of heaven, and then manipulate it as he desires. But it was never a speech that was just for him. It was never the sweetness of a real covenantal connection that the prophets have that Am Yisrael have. Nothing, nowhere near it. Therefore, our prophets, Moshe Rabbeinu for sure, can only receive prophecy when in a state of holiness. And so when we say, come, that there were prophets who made the world like Bilam, is the example of a prophet who was like Moshe. He had great spiritual powers of perception like Moshe, but he's not comparable to Moshe, really. Not at all. It was missing, like, basically the essence of what it's all about, and it was totally in a state of tuma. It was just that he could tune into the heavenly bureaucracy, hear what's going on, mazel tov. It's not real relating. Even though it was tremendously great in prophecy, but since that prophecy that he had was lacking and was with tuma, that's not really the greatness of what prophecy is. The greatness of prophecy is to be face to face, is to actually really be relating. Not just able to tune in and use the energy. Right? They never said that the depths of holy and pure nevuah anyone has like Moshe, just prophetic ability someone else had, but not what it really is, not the essence of what prophecy really is, not this level of relative. I'm trying to think of a good analogy with people. It's like I don't. Somebody he says he was like a tabach, like somebody who runs the kitchen of Shammai. You know, like the difference between the king's close, beloved, and trusted advisor, who he shares his deepest secrets with, and the king's cook, who like knows all the secrets and knows what's going on, but it doesn't have any. There's nothing personal about it. Just a hired hand, and he can grab things, can find a way to work things out that you can shoot a laser out of the palace and hurt someone. But it's nothing like Moshe Rabbeinu's prophecy, even though like his abilities were comparable. But when we really understand this, you understand that all the things Moshe had and Bilam didn't, and all the things Bilam had and Moshe didn't, are all showing the greatness of Moshe and the detriment of Bilam. It says, here he brings a different analogy. This that the cook knows what the king's going to eat. He knows before what the prophecy will be. He has this constancy to him. There's nothing really so special about that. Actually, lack of constancy is where real relationship is. Very, very interesting thing. Very fascinating thing.
Right, because it makes sense that he would know if you're like the chef in a king's kitchen, because the chef knows what ingredients are already there. He knows what had already led up to this. But things can happen that are not so predictable.
Things are not predictable, and also listen to the analogy. The person who's actually invited to sit with the king at his table and mamish relate to the king, he doesn't know what's going on in the kitchen. That's not his thing to know, to be involved in like the backs of the back room. Just when the table is set with all of its elegance, this is the honor and magnificence of the guest. That his relationship with the king is when all is set and proper and gets given to him, mamish, with honor and elegance. He doesn't know what the king's eating yet. It was only when the words would come out of Hashem's mouth, so to speak, directly. The davar zehu nevuah berura, and that's what's called clear prophecy. Umadrega zos davak Moshe v'yisvarach v'zema lasa kodesh amos. That was the greatness of Moshe. Bilam lo haya lo ma'ilazos. He was missing this. Lachech yada nevuah kodem shebadim. Therefore, he knew what was coming first. It's unbelievable. And this is similar to that he wasn't. Hashem didn't talk to Moshe at every moment. Hakolim shachacham v'yigosam alosov v'zeh ki in knows that yikach dibur Moshe panim al panim. Hashem spoke to Moshe face to face. Ein lada madrega zos Hashem yisbarach tamid panim panim. There's no such thing as a relationship with anyone between people that is constantly face to face. Sometimes there's time to go to sleep, and I do my thing, you do your thing. Even the person you love the most, even your spouse, even your kids, it's not constant face to face. You don't just sit there like face to face. You have special times to be face to face. That's a relationship. Look, that's how Hashem made the world to be, and that's how it's supposed to be, even with Him, even with Hashem. But by Bilam, it was different. There was a flow going. There's always a flow going out from heaven, but it's not directed. It's not specific. It's not relating. It's not a covenant. It's not a relationship. It's just energy flowing out. By Bilam, the Kabbalah, so Bilam was an expert. He had to use all his prophetic powers to just tune in to what's going on with the flow. Loya kan dibur panim apan. There was no face-to-face with him at all. It was all just picking up the vibes. No face-to-face, nothing face-to-face. It was totally like a stranger. Vaikar, mikre, happenstance. And therefore it was constant. It's a very interesting thing. It's counterintuitive. He had constant access, but that's a lower level than having inconstant, once in a while, very special pani b'pani. That's a much higher level. That's real relationship. And also this level, the Moshe didn't know who was talking to him, and Bilam did know. It's much higher. Moshe was looking with a very clear lens. Clearly seeing whatever he saw totally clearly. But God, Mamish God, you can't see totally clearly. Bilam had an image. That's because it was fuzzy. It was an unclear thing. So he got some kind of an image, and he said, I saw God. But it's not Mamish seeing God. That's not called really seeing God. Really seeing is actually knowing when you don't see. It's much deeper. Oh, yeah, mama. Just a little more, and we're done. And he has a beautiful thing about Moshe Rabbeinu's name. That, as we said, first of all, the Gemara says in Shabbos, "V'techasreu meyat me'elokim," that Hashem made Moshe a bit less than he himself. Even though Moshe was this like supreme prophet, but there are 50 gates of wisdom, and Moshe reached only 49. You can't get all the way to that. There's certain things reserved for God only, and but he got 49 out of 50. Me'at, he was a little less than Elokim. And this is because the Midrash says in Tehillim, Shocher Tov, Midrash Tehillim, chapter 90, the Moshe is called Isha Elokim. It says, Mechetzu lamata ha'ish, from this lower half down he was human, and from his upper half, Haya Elokim, he was godly. Mamish, unbelievable. Moshe Mamish is a supreme, unique. He was still fallible. He still made mistakes. He still did things wrong, didn't get into Eretz Yisrael, and so on, as we said. But there was something really unique about it. Therefore, we have to say that Moshe was like an intermediary from the heavenly realms, he was able to be the in-between, between the heaven and the earth.
Do we know these 49 gates?
There's Torah about it, Sefer Yetzirah, it's major Kabbalah stuff. I don't know. There are people who know. It's written about, but don't ask me. Therefore, Moshe went up to Shemaim and came back. As the pasuk says in Dvarim Perek, Anochi omed ben Hashem v'nechem. I was standing between Hashem and you. La'agid lachem dvar Hashem. And that was such a beautiful thing. Therefore, Moshe's name is Mem Shin Hey. Check this out. The Mem is exactly the middle letter of the Aleph base. Who emtzai beseder Aleph base. So that represents him being the intermediary, the Mem, right in the middle of the Aleph base. Then Shin, which is the second to last letter, that shows that he reached next to the depths of the end. He didn't get all the way to Taf, to the 50th gate, the 49th gate. Shin. The Mem, intermediary, reached the level of Shin, second to the best, second to the greatest. One less than the end. And then the letter Hey represents that he brought it down to us, to the lower realm. Because the letter Hey represents the last letter of Hashem's name, which is Midah of Malchus, of expression, bringing it all the way down. There are 5, in your mouth, there are 5 different parts of the mouth. Some linguistics divided into more than 5. If you say for Yetzirah, there are 5 different parts. There's the letters that form from the back of the mouth, like the het and the ayin and then there's the lips, the teeth, the tongue, and top of the mouth, and the back of the throat. So there's 5 that form, and the letters, the 22 letters, are grouped into 5 groups. Bet, Vav, Mem, Pei. I can't remember them all so well, but Gimel, Yud, Yichak, Gimel, Yud, Chaf, Kuf, Aleph, Ayin, Hey, Het, and Dalid, Nun, Tet, something like that. I forgot anyway. So there's 5. So Moshe is the last Hey. Salam alaikum. So the name Moshe, we're learning about Moshe Rabbeinu, we're ending now in just a minute or two. But the name Moshe, letter Mem, right in the middle of the Aleph base, represents how he brought together he stood as an intermediary between the heaven and the earth. The Shin, the second to last letter, representing that he gets to the second to the last level of all possible understanding. And then the Hey, that he then brings it down to this world and expresses it in language and expresses it all the way down into this world. So that's Moshe. Mem, Shin, Hey. So Be'ez Hashem, I'll just whet your appetite for tomorrow, for next week, that first of all, we're going to look a little bit at Korach's argument. Why does it have to be somebody who gives us the Torah? Why can't everything just be direct? We're going to look at the Maharal's answer this next week. And we'll also look at a huge question. Yesh lishol she'ela atzuma in chapter 23. Eich efshar she'yityachin Moshe ad she'ra'ui lo haTorah. How could Moshe become so special that he could be, as a single human being, the right person for the Torah, for the divine Torah to come through? Eich efshar lomar she'yisyachid adam al madrikas haTorah. How could any human being be on the level to really give us the Torah? So we're going to see this in Hashem and Hashem next week. Great to see you, Reb Tovi. Amish, great to see you. Shalom, shalom. Okay.
I got confused when you sent out that other email. I thought, oh, it's 2:30. So, I'm so sorry.
Oh,
Missed
it's
it.
no problem. It's
I'll listen.
I recorded it on YouTube, and I'll send you into Hashem the link.